Today we're at Herman Park on Jackson Street, just off Jackson Street here in Goldsboro. We're talking with Jessica Strickland of the Cooperative Extension Service. You're the horticulture agent. Now, what does that mean? What do you do?
Well, we work with people and helping them with their gardens when they have questions or they want to know how to get started in gardening. So that's main focus is working with gardeners.
And that in just a few words is what you do, but there's a
Yes.
whole lot more
There
than
is
that.
a lot to it, yes.
Let me also say that it is cold out here today.
It
The
is.
winds are blowing, but you don't want to do what we're about to do in extremely warm weather, do you?
That's right. We have had some weird weather this year so far where it's been really warm. A lot of things are sprouting out, but here today we've got crepe myrtles, which are a summer blooming tree or shrub, depending on how you prune it.
Yeah.
And so far we don't have any buds or anything yet, so we're still good on we can prune these.
Okay, now we're going to talk about pruning, and we're going to show some demonstrations on how to prune and what to prune. Now, why do you prune, first of all?
First thing, there's several reasons you prune. A lot of times people are trying to control the size. They're trying to keep the structure and the shape that keeps the plant, as far as gives the plant some strength. And then too, just to make it look nicer is a lot of times why we prune.
Okay. What about some of the reasons would be to perhaps cut off the dead wood?
A lot of times the dead wood, diseased wood, we cut that off is
yeah.
to keep the plant healthier.
Yeah.
Is another part that helps with pruning.
Okay. Is there a level where you should not prune? Should you not prune any more than or any less than a certain amount?
Usually you hear about a third is the rule, that you don't want to prune more than a third of the plant at a time. There are some exceptions to that rule. For example, we have some plants in the back that are holly, some shrubs, that sometimes you could prune those low to the ground and let those rejuvenate. It's a rejuvenating pruning. Do it this time of year, late winter, early spring, and let that plant grow back and be more compacted and control the size a little bit. So there's a few, shrubs like that we can prune a little differently.
Like holly bushes, you can cut those pretty much.
You can.
Severely.
Azaleas, if your azaleas get too big, you can cut those back and let them start. It's not a pruning that you necessarily do every year, but every 2 or 3 years you might do that just to rejuvenate it and get the plant looking better.
Okay, so azaleas. What about roses?
Roses usually we cut back pretty far. If we're talking about the modern roses, which is with a flower that's blooming on one stem, then you're pruning those back and keeping about 3 to 5 of the healthiest canes and cut those canes to where they're about a foot or two above the ground.
You said 3 to 5, and that's just a good number.
It is, yeah, just kind of a rough estimate of how many canes you would keep.
It just looks a lot better than 4 and 6 and 8.
Yeah, and it also opens it up for air circulation, so that helps prevent some disease problems that roses can get in the summertime.
Okay, but now those are okay to cut back and leave what, 6-inch canes maybe?
Yes.
Would be a good number.
Yeah, that would work.
You don't have to cut them all the way to the ground.
No, you don't have to.
You don't want to either.
No, you want to keep some of it there.
Some of it there.
Yes.
Now, and you mentioned holly bushes. That's another one you can pretty much cut back severely.
You can. Usually people do it about every 2 or 3 years. If it's the shrub's getting too big, they cut them back lower to the ground and let them start over, and kind of controls the size and keeps it more compact.
Now, the time of year is extremely important that you do this.
It is. Most of what we prune is this time of year, late winter, early spring. There's a few exceptions. The main one is your spring blooming shrubs. That's azaleas, forsythia, some of your spireas, those types of plants, hydrangeas. You want to wait on those until after they bloom, because right now they have flower buds that they formed last fall that's going to bloom this year. So if you couldn't prune them now, you're cutting off the flowers.
Cutting off the flower. Don't want to do that. Now, those are the spring blooming
Yes, spring blooming shrubs.
Azalea particularly, we grow
Azalea's
a lot of
best
azaleas
example.
here.
That's right. Azalea's best example. You don't want to prune them now. Now, if you're doing that rejuvenation where you're going to kind of start it over, you could go ahead and do that because it gives it time to get some growth on it throughout the year and gets it reestablished. But you would lose some of the flowers then for this year.
So you don't want to do that. February is the ideal month to do this.
It is. Usually we say mid to late February is the best time to prune them.
To prune them. And so azaleas, you want to leave those alone, as you say. But now, what about the temperature? If you start pruning now, that's going to generate new growth in a lot of cases.
It is. Whenever we make cuts and we prune, it does generate some new growth. So timing is important as far as like with our crepe myrtles, with how warm the weather's been. So far, we've not seen buds on, but if we started seeing buds on them, that new growth's going to have flowers. So we want to get that done before those new buds begin.
All right, and as I understand it, if there's new buds on there and they're not opening, then and we get a mild frost, they're okay.
Yeah, as long as those buds are closed tight, usually they're protected. The problem is whenever it's got small leaves on it where those buds have already opened, that's where we could see some damage.
That's where we see damage. All right, now tell me about some of the things you have here that we use to prune. What is this?
Okay, with pruning, we always say it's important to have the right tool, and there's a few different pruning tools. This is the one you're going to use the most is your hand pruners. Usually this is for your smaller branches. If they're about less than 1.5 inches in diameter, that's when you use the hand pruners. These are bypass pruners. So bypass pruners, the blades actually cross each other. So
like
it makes
scissors.
Yes, it makes a nice clean cut. So you want to make sure you get that. If you do a lot of pruning, there's a lot of options where you can spend a lot of money on a pair of pruners or you can spend a little bit. But if you do a lot of pruning, you probably want to invest a little bit of money. If you're left-handed, there's ones for left-handed. There's ones that are better as far as for your wrist if you're doing a lot of repetitive motions. Right. So there's a lot of options. There's ones that can have replacement blades so you don't have to replace the whole tool every time. Okay. These are really good. You don't want to use them for bigger branches once you get past about 1.5 inches in diameter, because what happens is you're kind of trying to cut through that and you're not making a nice clean cut. You want in one swoop you want to make a nice clean cut. If you're having to kind of tear at it or and work through that branch, you're making more tears, and that allows you've got an open wound, just like if you cut your skin or something that bacteria or fungus, some type of disease or insect could get in there, or you get some moisture and get some rot. So we want a nice clean cut so that way it heals quickly and the plant stays healthy.
Okay, now this is up to 1 inch. What about those that are bigger than an inch?
Okay, so the next one up probably is your loppers, and this is a fancy pair. So this does some serious cutting. Again, same way, there's a lot of choices. You can get some real simple loppers. Sometimes the blades dull quickly or they just don't last long. If you're doing a lot of pruning, again, investing a little bit of money helps, because like this one has a shock guard, so it makes a nice smooth cut. You're not having to really work at it as hard. It helps make that cut a little easier to make on those larger branches.
That looks like you could cut a 3 or 4 inch limb.
Yeah, you could. And it says
you have the strength.
Yeah, so on here it does say it cuts up to 1 3/4 inch, but yeah, getting up to a couple inches.
Yeah, I don't cut 2 inches either.
Yeah, but it makes that motion easier when you're trying to make a nice clean cut.
You're using let's see now, what is the class? It was the physics. You're using physics.
Yes.
Because the handle is longer and you have more a longer area, which makes never mind.
That's right. No, but that's true. And then when you get branches that are higher up in the tree, you can even get these where they have extended arms, and that way it'll extend it where you can reach higher tree. Of course, this one, it's pretty heavy, so that's. You got to consider too that weight trying to get it higher if it's a heavy type of loppers.
It's a trade-off.
But again, it's really good for bigger branches. We've got a couple here we'll use them for where they're larger branches. This will make a better cut than your hand pruners.
And again, you want to keep it as smooth a cut as possible.
Yes, you do. Yeah, a nice clean cut's what you want. So you want to keep sharp blades, sharpen the blades, or get them replaced as they dull.
Okay. Well, good. Let's do some cutting here. Let's find out what we need to do here.
Okay, with this one we're looking at crepe myrtles, and the first thing we do is look for dead, damaged, dying branches, and there's really not much here. These have been really pruned very well, taken well care of. We do recommend with crepe myrtles that we don't top them off. And that's where you're pretty much going through and you're just lopping them off.
I see that all the time.
Yes, and a lot of times we refer to that kind of jokingly as crepe murder, that you're murdering the tree. And what you end up is these large, if you make that cut there every year, you end up these large knots. And where you made that cut, you get a lot of small, weak branches. They can't really support the flowers. They're very weak. And then you've got that knot where you're going to get eventually some rotting in there and damage the plant. So a lot of people do it for several reasons. Sometimes they just see other people do it and say, well, they did it, I'm going to do it too, and without realizing that probably that person's not doing it right either.
All right, so the ideal situation for pruning crepe myrtles is you want how many
you want anywhere to 3 to 5 trunks that you want to keep.
3 to 5.
Yeah.
All right. And this one accidentally has 4.
Yeah, and you do, most of them it looks like have 4. There's a few that have extra. And with that, now you do see some they want to keep one trunk and make it a nice single trunk tree, and that's perfectly fine. So you do have some options with crepe myrtles as far as how you want the base of it to look over time as it gets bigger. And you got to have to think about it as far as you're training the tree, not necessarily just cutting it, you're training it So when you're training, you want to think about how's it going to look in the future, you know, as far as that appearance that you might be after.
So there's 8 million different cultivars of
There
crepe myrtle.
is. And a lot of times too, you know, I mentioned people lop them off or top them just because they see other people do it. Another reason is trying to control the size. So there's a lot of different crepe myrtles available. So if you're picking them out, consider your size and pick smaller ones for small spaces that don't have a lot of room. And then you can pick your bigger ones and give them the space in other areas. And then you don't have to worry about topping them off to control that size.
Right. Different cultivars. And some are small and some are large.
Yes.
Some are actually trees and some are
That's
shrubs.
Right. Some are shrub-like too. So, yeah. With this one, the first thing we look at is any dead, dying, or diseased branches.
Right.
Don't see any really on here. It's in pretty good shape. Then the next thing look at is kind of crossing branches. And I did notice there's just a couple. Right in here's one. If you think about it, as this plant gets bigger, it's already rubbing that. As those branches rub, they're going to create a wound and damage to the plant where, again, moisture, rotting, insect or pest problems could get in there.
All right, well, let's
So
go ahead and
okay.
cut that off. Now
I'll trade with you here.
Okay. All right. Now,
And when you make a cut, we'll point out what you're looking at is the branch collar.
the collar.
Mhm,
Is a
yes.
little thick area there, right?
It is. It's a little thick area, and you're going just in front of that. The reason for that is it's found that that's where it heals the quickest. So if
Okay.
we cut into that branch collar and cut it flush with the next branch, then you're leaving a wider wound, and it's not allowing it to heal as fast. You cut too much into the tree.
All right, so you look for the little thick area near the part you're cutting. All right,
Okay, and then, you know, just in front of that branch collar,
okay.
and that's all there is to it. So now you're going to prevent that branch from crossing.
Okay.
And there's a couple of small ones in there that we would take out just so they don't cross in the future.
Okay. When they cross, they're rubbing, and it could create
They are.
problem, disease, and such.
Yes. So and then the next thing I would look at is the sprouts at the bottom.
Okay.
And this one. Okay.
All right.
Right.
All right. Now the sprouts at the bottom. If you'll come right over here.
Okay.
How do you approach this now?
Okay. This one we're going to go again to where it meets another branch.
Okay.
I didn't point out that when you cut a branch, you don't want to leave like a stub. You do want to go to that branch collar. Leaving a stub, that will rot. And again, it's another one that damages the health of the tree. So we're going to go to the branch.
All right. So
Cut that.
you don't, when you're cutting, you don't want to leave anything like that.
You don't.
You want to
Yes.
cut right here at the collar.
Because what happens is that piece you leave will rot,
Uh-huh.
and then you can see where it rots can go on into the main branch and
Oh,
into your
yeah.
main
Then you
trunk.
got big
and
trouble.
It'll take several years, but years down the road, you see that damage. And sometimes you see that on some sides of larger old trees where they've had some damage or something. You see where the rotting's occurred down through the trunk.
Okay. Now the part we're interested in here is about 3/4 of an inch or so,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah, so we're going to use the loppers for that
use
one.
the loppers on that
Okay.
one. All right. Here you go.
All right, I'll trade with you.
All right, trade with me, and we're going to go down here, and we're going to. All right. Okay, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's a little tricky, but right there is probably.
All right. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And then.
All right. There you go.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Now, there may be some other, as you mentioned, some crossings here.
Yeah, there could be a couple others, like right here's one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we'll take, and that one you can kind of tell, it goes back to where maybe a branch was taken out or broken before.
Uh-huh. Right.
So what I would do is cut it right here and let this branch grow out,
All right. Cut it here.
or right above.
Oh, here.
Yep.
I see.
Yep.
Okay. Now, this branch right here
Mm-hmm.
will grow out that way.
Yes, and sometimes you have to think about that. What direction is that branch going to go in the future? This one, we took this one out because it's going up and crossing,
Yeah.
but instead this one is going out, so that's, we want them to go up and out.
All right. Is it too early to say, well, I need to cut this?
You could wait on that. It's really up to you to wait. Right there is one of those stubs
Yeah,
that
you can
I would
see.
cut back a little closer to that branch. Yep.
Okay.
But that's really it. And once you really get in the habit of doing an annual pruning, you can tell with this, it's pretty easy. It doesn't require a lot of work. and just kind of clean it up a little bit each year, and you're good to go.
All right. And then your shrubs and trees will be healthy?
Yes.
What would be the difference between a shrub and pruning a tree? Is it pretty much the same?
It does vary a little bit. A tree, you're looking at trying to get that structure. A shrub's a little different because, like with these hollies, you've got the leaves, it's harder to see the branches. Instead, you're trying to maintain the shape. These, it looks like they've cut back in the past to kind of rejuvenate and start them over. So really with these, they're in good shape. All you'd want to do is kind of clean up just some of the little ones that are kind of out of place. Like this one, I would prune it back to where it meets another branch just because it sticks out by itself.
Right.
And just to keep that shape maintained. Unless you're doing a formal garden, we really don't want to hedge or just shear the top and turn them into kind of what I call meatball shrubs that are perfectly round. That's not the natural shape of the
and
plant.
it's too formal.
It is, and for most people it's too formal, and it's a lot of work. Once you start that, you've got to keep that up.
Right.
So if you're having to do a lot of pruning, especially 3 or 4 times during the year just to maintain that shape, probably too much to do that. So instead, we want to keep the natural shape. So you want branches that are different heights, different spacings, and so forth to let that shrub have its natural shape.
Okay, if anyone has any questions, they need help with this. Is there a pamphlet on this?
We do. We've got a lot of information on how to prune trees and shrubs, and they can contact our office to get those, and they can stop by and pick them up, or we can mail them to them. And our office number is 919-731-1520.
731-1520, 731-1520. Jessica Strickland is the horticulture agent for the County of Wayne at the Cooperative Extension Service. Jessica, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.